Let's talk about triggers today, how misunderstood this word is, and how profound our world would shift if people actually understood what the true purpose of triggers are. First of all, we live in a world where there is such large amounts of vapid information when it comes to pop psychology, self-help, social media, dumbing things down. And so everybody and their brother is walking around these days using psychological terms and diagnoses as if they are psychologists. And while it's beautiful for people to really understand the basics of psychology, and there's a huge benefit, and I really advocate for people understanding Psychology 101 and applying it to their lives because that's huge to be able to have this fundamental understanding. There are so many people who think that they understand these deep psychological terms that have no idea what they're talking about. So, first of all, a trigger, the truest definition of that from a psychological perspective, is not just anything in the world that annoys you. Okay, that's the first thing that I see people using it incorrectly is that they're calling every single thing a trigger. The true definition of a trigger is when something happens on the external, either from a person or a situation in our lives, and it comes in and it's a trigger that presses upon or activates or touches an unhealed wound inside of us. And then that creates a reaction. And the reaction that it creates is typically not a match for the situation. So it's an overreaction. This is how we know it's a trigger and not just something that's happening in the external world that's annoying or that we don't like, right? So this is the first thing that I wanted to tell you is that a trigger has a purpose behind it. The trigger comes up to show us where we still need to do healing internally. So the way that most people deal with triggers, right? You triggered me. They point the finger, they blame the external, person or situation, which immediately puts them into victim mentality. Poor me, right? There's nothing going on over here that I need to look at. It's just pointing the finger and blaming. This is something that is critically important for us to understand for two reasons. Number one, when we do this, we miss the lesson. We miss what it's actually pointing us to, which really has to do with our own healing. It shows us where there's still holes in our consciousness, where there's still trauma that needs love, care, and attention that we need to be able to deal with, right? To be able to show care to ourselves in the multitude of ways that we can do that, right? There's so many different ways for us now, right? Everybody's talking about healing our trauma, being able to do the inner work so that we don't need to continually spin out in these reactions, right? So this is very, very empowering. Most people do the complete opposite. Rather than push the pause button, recognize that it's a true trigger that does not require us blaming, pointing the finger, but instead turning towards ourselves to check in to see what is being activated, what is being touched inside of me that this is attempting to lead me back to within myself. That alone, if we changed our approach to how we deal with a true trigger, it could change the whole fabric of society. So I just want you to sit with that for a moment. When I come on here and I share teachings that I literally believe can change the whole world, this is actually one of them. Because if we actually learn how to deal with triggers in the true intention behind that, which is to lead us back home to our healing, it would dissolve so much conflict in the world. Because whenever we're pointing the finger and blaming somebody, you're entering into a conflict that is ultimately not going to be productive. And so when we do this time and time again, life will continue to serve you up the same lessons and press on the same triggers inside of you, the unhealed wounds, until we actually learn this, right? So it does represent a higher level of consciousness. when we're able to understand this. So that's what I want to say, right? And so oftentimes it is something that's just leading us back here. There are situations where it's not super black or white. There's some situations where we do need to, with the trigger, let's just say there's a person, right? There's a person that comes in and they speak to you disrespectfully. There might be a combination of things going on. Maybe there is part of it is a trigger because you have wounds perhaps from childhood where you had a lot of abusive or disrespectful behavior directed at you, right? That still need love, care, and attention and healing. But then simultaneously, a boundary does need to be set. So it's not black or white where we often only need to turn within to be able to really do our healing, right? Oftentimes that's part of it. Sometimes, and this is where we really need to be able to slow things down, to sit with these things and to understand. Number one, is this really a trigger? Or is this person actually just annoying me? Are they actually just displaying behavior that's not okay? And I need to just set a boundary with them, right? That would be an instance where happens all the time, right? Not everything is a trigger. Sometimes people are just annoying. Sometimes we just have to set boundaries and it's actually not about us and it's just more about that the other person, right? And their stuff. This is actually a good way to start to think about this, right? Is this situation, is this mine? Is it the other person's or is it a combination of both? So there was a situation that happened recently that was actually a combination of a little bit of a trigger, right, for me, but then also did require a conversation and setting boundaries, right, with somebody. And so it hopefully this is making sense because it also it's not always black or white. Sometimes it kind of is though. It's really about my stuff, right? It's really about me taking ownership, taking personal responsibility, much more so than it is about the thing. This is when we start to really live life so much more consciously, and it does represent a higher level of consciousness that really it's not optional anymore, right? For us to start to think about this stuff because the world is getting, everything's getting turned up. I hear so often from clients that things are really speeding up. So on this path of practicing relationships consciously, for example, we understand that life is serving us every single day the material that we need. It's utter perfection on a divine level. It doesn't always feel good, but the exact material that life is serving us every single day is reflecting back to us where we're at, where our current edges are, in addition to opening to massive blessings all around us. So it's not all bad. I just wanted to say that. But this is our understanding is that life is always attempting to give us the exact material we need for healing, for growth, for evolution. So this whole thing of being able to see that represents a step up in terms of our level of consciousness and how we actually participate in our life, in our everyday reality as humans versus the victim mentality, which is a lower level of consciousness that the programming is always trying to keep us stuck in because victim mentality, which by the way is very, very different from actually being a victim, which happens all the time, right? Victim mentality is when you are stuck in a prison where you truly believe every day, right? Unconsciously, mostly, that life is against you, that you are getting the short end of the stick, right? Et cetera, et cetera. I was living in victim mentality for so long until one of my mentors gave me a hard pill to swallow, which was she woke me up to the fact that I was in victim mentality. Hard to hear, but to this day, one of the most empowering things ever when we can wake up and understand that we have to, as adults, take responsibility. We can't go back in time. We can't change our childhoods. On some level, everything did happen the way that it was meant to, which I know is a very edgy thing, but it's really it's really true. It's meant on a level of soul evolution and our curriculum that was designed for us to become the best version, right? Even if that means that you're somebody like me who has gone through hard things and you've been able to heal and come up and out the other side to be able to help other people who are struggling with the same things, right? Maybe that's why it's happening for you. For a lot of people that come to me, that's true, right? They have had to go through a lot of hard things in their life. This is, especially when you come to this path of relationships, it's an initiatory path where we are initiated. And oftentimes it's through things that are hard. It doesn't always need to be that way, but many of us have to become alchemists to be able to take the stuff that doesn't feel good, to be able to find the gold within it while having a lot of compassion for ourselves. And then to be able to, this is the how character is built, it's how resilience is built, and it's how we become empowered ultimately as humans. Such a nuanced topic, but let's just get back to triggers. So I just wanted to really gently invite all of us to, before we have knee-jerk reactions where we name everything a trigger, really ask yourself, is this true? Right? Is it really like if it's true and I'm going to use that word, I better actually be checking within myself and validating, yes, it's a trigger because it's touching this unhealed wound. And so if that is true, what are you going to do about it? Right? We have knee-jerk reactions to blame the person or the situation, but that's not, and you can do that all day long and we're human. And trust me, I've done it many times before. But as long as we continue to point outside of ourselves when what's really being called for is for us to go within and heal that thing, we're going to continue to loop and loop and loop and loop and loop. This is how the universe works, right? This is how it works. Until we actually wake up and we get the true message, we're going to continue to be pressed, to be tested every single day. Think about the bigger implications here with human relationships worldwide and how this simple understanding of like, let me actually see what it's pointing to inside of me and let's actually continue on with my healing. This is a huge way to avoid conflict. We're living in an era of war right now. And so, what's up right now on the table for humanity is to be able to understand how are we dealing with conflict in a healthy way, right? Is this really the higher level of consciousness that humanity is being invited into? Is it war frequency, or is it actually coming into a higher level of maturity and consciousness with how we navigate conflict? In human to human relationships, whether that's with friends, family, or romantic partners, I work with people to understand how to navigate conflict as well, to just bring it down to a very practical level. And this whole thing about taking personal responsibility for our side of the street oftentimes starts with this fundamental understanding of what a trigger is. So I really want to hear from you. Is this making sense? Is it landing? And can you really just sit with, let this digest? And first of all, just like feel into the incredible importance and potential of this. Can you imagine living in a world where the vast majority of people were working with triggers in this way? How would that change the state of humanity? You know, a lot of times like I speak in these ways, but it doesn't make it untrue. Even if it seems like it's a big thing to say, it is still true. And so it starts with us and our ability to understand what's really happening here with this game, right? Or with this life that we're given, which is really, I believe, it's a curriculum for soul evolution through us being able to see what do I still need to heal? Where do I still need to grow? Right? And it's not an endless lifetime of suffering, of healing, of licking our wounds. It's not that. But there does have to, for many of us, be a chapter, or maybe more than a chapter of time where we do spend healing. Right. But there's also the whole upper limit problem that I speak about too, of actually expanding and being able to let in the blessings, the good, to be able to receive and not stay stuck in a life where we're constantly addicted to finding the next thing wrong with us. So if you're interested in that, go to the upper limit video and watch that, right? And it's up to us to decide, where are we? What season of our life are we in? With humbleness and humility, to be able to understand, if you are somebody who needs to continue to do deep inner work, trauma healing, shadow work, right? There's no shame, right? I met with somebody yesterday who actually kind of misinterpreted something that I was saying around the upper limit problem. And I'm not saying that this is for everybody, right? To immediately jump into seeing the upper limit problem, right? Because like people who come to me that applies to, that particular teaching, are people who have done years and years and years and years of endless work, right? Endless work, right? Where shadow work, trauma healing does, right? If that's only where you're spending your time, there's a difference between, is it warranted, or has it actually become an addiction and an excuse for me not to actually fully live my life? It's a whole thing, right? So my main purpose and intention today is to really clarify what a true trigger is. This is huge right now, especially with the frequency with which humans are actually using the term trigger and really missing the boat and misunderstanding it, right? This could immediately change the game when it comes to human relationships, conflict, and healing, right? And ultimately up leveling into the new era, right? The new era of human relationships. So I would love to hear if this makes sense, if this lands for you. And this is something where we will be working on. This is a foundational teaching that can completely change your life and all your relationships. So we will be working with the triggers and how to appropriately work with them in the foundation, the group program that is foundational level skills. Starts March 24th. I would love to have you. There's limited spots. There's people already signing up. This is work that I do with people, that I previously did with people only in the high level way showers mentorship, which is a very, very intensive offering. This is the first time I'm offering it in a group container, where we're going to spend that foundational work, 3 months of a deep dive, an immersive experience together, doing the foundational ground level skills. Dealing with our triggers is definitely one of them, as it relates to emotional intelligence, right? And relational intelligence, as well as developing secure attachment, recognizing codependency and stepping out of it, working with boundaries, and all of the other things that are on the page. I'll put a link below in this video. In the meantime, if you have any questions or if this lands, I really want to hear in the comments. And so I hope this was helpful. And ultimately, triggers are here for us. It doesn't mean they feel good. They don't. But ultimately, they are here for us. And it's so wild to think, when we shift our orientation and we send those signs and signals to the universe, thank you, I understand. Okay, I know what I have to do. We don't have to be perfect ever, but these small steps forward with how we show up to triggers, to relationships, and how we feel about our life, huge. There is so much benevolent support available to us when we can recognize this. And so it's not about perfection, but it is about really understanding this first, right? And then starting to apply it. So hope everyone is doing well. Talk to you soon.